This is Rashad from the TRON podcast, The Randomness of Nothing. Now, I have been waiting for this one for a long time. This is Professor Brent Insco of Downriver Jiu-Jitsu, and this is where the secret science of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is taught, and he is an excellent coach, and I am honored to get a chance to, that he took a chance to carve out time out of his busy schedule. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. So I came down here about 2.5 years ago, and you got into Jiu-Jitsu, and you've done it for so long, and a lifelong martial artist. What's your martial arts journey been like?
Well, I started martial arts when I was 11 years old. I'm going to be 44 here, so I've been doing it for over 30 years. Been practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for around 22 years.
Amazing.
A student of the game. Absolutely love martial arts. I just fell in love with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but that's kind of a quick story of that.
Yeah, what's crazy is that most guys, you and I are very close in age. So, you go into martial arts, you kind of fall off, and then it becomes kind of a lonely sport where you really have to be dedicated. It's not like at school where you go to football, baseball, and it's team. You have to come after school and really take time out of school. So when you first got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what was that like? Because it's such a unique style.
I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I was around 22, 23. Back then, it wasn't really that popular. I remember they had at the time UFC was only doing 3 pay-per-views a year. So I actually just stumbled upon it from one of my professors coming up, T.R.O.N. Gooden. I met him at a karate school that I used to be affiliated with. So at that time, I'd gotten in a bad car accident. I was kind of rehabilitating my body, got back into training. And I ran into this gentleman at a karate school. There was just an open grappling mat. He just came in. He didn't have a school at the time. He was in between that. And we just became friends. And then he introduced me to my other professors that gave me my black belt, Salo and Sanji Hibero.
Beautiful. So. And when I first came in here, there's a large hesitation of, okay, I have previous martial arts experience, but there's not a lot you can draw from. When I came from karate and taekwondo, the vulnerability and the lack of experience of grappling is really jarring. Right? Yeah. Because you're like, I'm getting manhandled, and this is really hard to accept. But as your mind starts to, first of all, the cardio is much different. Yeah. Your muscles are getting heavier a lot faster, and you're not used to having your limbs taken. So, and I think you do a great job instructing people at all levels of how they get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Thank you.
And particularly from somebody from a different style that's like, okay, what's next? Because there's a frustration level that hits.
Yeah.
That's just like, I know martial arts, but I don't know this well.
I had that same problem too. I remember when I first started training, but I actually loved it. One of my professors, Salo Hibero, I remember I rolled with him as a white belt, and it was only like a 5-minute match. I think he tapped me like 6 times in 5 minutes. And I remember just absolutely loving this. I was like, this is so awesome. This is what I was looking for, because like a lot of martial artists, like we fall in love because I'm older. Yeah. And I'm sure you know this, like Bruce Lee, everyone admired Bruce Lee. And it was something that, it was what I was looking for, like a very efficient martial art. That is kind of like the essence of martial art, right? The ability to beat a larger attacker. And that's what I got from Jiu-Jitsu. And I think it's one of the few arts where you feel so empowered, because when you get really good at it, you can beat people that are larger, assuming your technical skill level is much higher. Right. But that's how I felt. I remember when I got tapped like that many times, I was like, this is awesome. And I just absolutely fell in love with the martial arts.
Yeah. And one of the things that got me was, I hear I'm a white belt, and, I'm getting manhandled by a blue belt. I got enough experience, and you did a great job when you said, hey, nobody off the street who I've been training should be able to come in and just take you. And so then all of a sudden, when I go against an inexperienced white belt, I'm making moves. I'm like, yo, man, I'm actually okay, not great. And you feel much better psychologically that you can do something. And you're like, this did pay off.
You don't realize how much better you've gotten until you roll up the guy off the street.
No clue.
When you have 6 months plus experience, and you're like, wow, I have gotten a lot better.
I swear to God.
Because we're always training with our training partners that are getting better as well.
Yes.
And you're like, it's always close and competitive, but then when you get someone that has no experience, you're like,
absolutely. And so my first experience in grappling, real briefly, I didn't wrestle at all. I had no grappling experience to speak of. I was at Michigan State, did a semester at the judo club, and that was the beginning experience of like, oh, this is different.
Yeah,
this is different, right? So a lot of ego swallowing, a lot of pride had to go put off to the side to do this. So when you decided to start your own gym and start training, and you've done an immaculate job, what was that like, opening a gym for the first time?
Well, actually, so who inspired me originally? I used to be a school teacher. Mm-hmm. The economy wasn't doing so well, and my wife and even my professor, one of my professors, Chris Blank at the time, really pushed me to open a school. And so I did that. I started off with like a 1,000 square foot place.
Yeah.
I'm proud to say, like, now we've built this academy up very well.
Wonderfully.
I started, I didn't want to have any debt. So I started at the very bare bones. I mean, literally my space was looked like a closet almost. It was like just 1,000 square feet. Like jiu-jitsu wasn't really popular. I mean, this is back in 2004. Sorry. I started training in 2004. 2010 is when I opened up my gym.
Wonderful. That's, and what's crazy is, to your point, when jiu-jitsu, I was martial arts as a kid. I did it till 6th grade, didn't do it in junior high school, came back in college. There was no jiu-jitsu. You had to really, that's a specialized style to look. There's karate places that are very prevalent, obviously, because of the Bruce Lee Van Damme craze. But, you really got to go out of your way to really find this style back pre-2004,
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I remember when I was looking for academies, it was people went on a website. There was a forum, used to be called, I don't know if it's still around, MMA.tv. And people would go on this underground forum and look up jiu-jitsu schools off of that. I mean, that's how I found schools in the area. I figured Google wasn't as good then.
No.
And you couldn't easily advertise. So I think what's changed largely is the marketing. And that's a whole nother animal. Now with social media wasn't as big when I started in 2004. And, it started getting better. Even you figure 2010.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's a lot of things have changed even in the last 6-7 years.
Absolutely.
Social media and everything. So I think that's been the biggest thing. But it was really underground. I remember when I started, and it was word of mouth. Who are you training with? Who do you know? And that's kind of how you learned who was good.
Right.
Whereas now, people can kind of just, if they want to find a school, they just go on Google and look at jiu-jitsu schools near me, right?
Well, it was so funny because I was like, where, here in Riverview, I was like, man, where's the place? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, snap, this thing's right around the corner from my house. So it was crazy how it kind of just worked itself out. Now, full disclosure, because of the aesthetics of seeing Van Damme, right? So you're like, and then you see jiu-jitsu, and in your mind as a karate practitioner, you're like, is that really doing something? Right. That was hard for me to understand that, okay, how effective is this? Because, anybody watches boxing, you see a quick knockout.
Yeah.
You see a flying helicopter kick. And then you're watching that and you're like, okay, what is that? Because that's not something that I'm used to seeing.
I think if you grew up in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
You saw Van Damme. that was it. Van Damme and
Yeah,
Rocky. You
right.
saw punching and kicking. And
Right.
I was there too because I have a black belt in karate as well.
Correct.
And I did, I thought the same thing, You see that. But it wasn't actually until I think it would change the world. You have to give credit to Royce Gracie.
Oh my gosh.
First UFC, when he started taking people down, and then even more wrestlers doing the same thing.
Right.
Doing that, these guys in the grassroots of MMA started changing the perspective because I think it was just from movies. People would be like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen in a fight.
Right.
And then they would say, and then eventually people realize, oh, this grappling is very effective.
Yes.
And then like anything, there's an evolution of the martial art. Now modern day MMA is
Right.
Guys are very amazing grapplers and amazing strikers at the same time.
For
So
sure.
you can't just be one or the other now.
Right. And so, it's helped me because, number one, it's helped me just mentally be prepared to get my butt kicked and be okay getting my butt kicked. And then I'm like, okay, now there's nothing I can replicate working out that's this. You do 3 minutes of sparring, intense, you're really finding out what you're made of in here. Right. And so, the workouts, and the lack of flexibility that somebody may have, age, demographic, it really doesn't matter because you've done a good job of bridging people's gaps in skill, age, weight, size, gender. And you do an excellent job of that.
Well, thank you. I think a lot of that has to do with my teaching background. Before I even started teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I taught karate for several years. I used to have a community center program. And then I went to school for teaching, and I have a teaching degree. I taught for 2 years. It was a full-time sub for a year. I think because unfortunately in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have people that might be, they're good at it. They might be a good competitor, but when they open a school, they have zero experience teaching.
Right.
And I actually think a lot of people should take even a coach's course or something, or something where they learn to coach because they think, oh, I'm a great competitor. I know what I'm doing teaching. Teaching is completely different than how good I've seen people that are incredible competitors and they can't teach at all. But then I've seen also some good people that are good competitors and they can teach too. I think, yes, having some experience in the martial art gives you some insight. But you look at John Danaher, he's considered one of the greatest minds in our martial art, and he has very limited competition experience, but he's known for his teaching prowess because he's such an amazing instructor.
Right.
But he also has a big education background and he had so much experience teaching. I think that's very important. I think a lot of people, fortunately, I think that's one of my advantages too as a coach. I've been teaching for so long, so
it's wonderful, and it shows with the school that you run and the people the talent, and like I said, I've always looking forward. I wish it could come more, right? And I'm like, man, I really need to be in there because mentally, still wearing that white belt, you're just like, and then you compare it to your black belt and your other style, you're just like, man, there's something missing right here. Right? There's something mentally not right at this moment because you can obtain and you're teachable, but there's so many intricate techniques that you just have to get used to.
Yeah, I think what actually even attracted me to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I believe that's what makes these martial arts effective is really how they practice, right? So the problem with a lot of traditional martial arts is that there's a lot of like shadowing moves and doing moves with no resistance. But unfortunately, with the striking though, you have to pull your punches out. Just like we do in grappling, we don't crank on submissions and we don't, go as hard as we can all the time. So there has to be in all martial arts some rule sets and some control and like agreed upon like rules with your training partner for safety.
Right.
But like even in striking though, you can't hit someone as hard as you can. You can hit a heavy bag, you can hit mitts, but you can't hit a human being.
Right.
But traditional martial arts, I think they do a poor job because now some clubs can be different because I had a good karate school where there was contact sparring.
Right.
If there's no sparring, there's no contact. That's another argument.
I think, to your point, just briefly, the idea that it's never going to be, applicable to a real situation. At some point, you have to get comfortable, like getting submitted. And what I like about jiu-jitsu, that has a benefit over the striking background, is you can't go 75%, right? And the risk of injury is much lower. So you're like, let's go hard for 3 minutes, respectable partner. Let's go. Let's see what you can do, right? Okay, I tapped, I choked. And that's what, like the repetition. And
you go closer to a fight. You can go closer to a fight speed
100%
more often.
Right.
So I think that's why, to your point, that's why it's effective martial arts because we can go close to a fight speed.
Right.
And it can stay safe. Whereas like if I'm sparring with somebody, it's very dangerous to be hitting as hard as I can.
Right.
You can knock people out in training, and then how often can you do that? You're going to get knocked out 5, 6, 7 times. It's not good for your brain.
Not a question.
So, but I think that's what makes Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu unique.
Right.
And of course, we're pulling our punches, so to speak, when we grapple, but it can match closer to a fight.
Absolutely. And it's and I thought that I just love it, right? Because just getting, hey, I got choked out, and you're like tapping yourself on the back, like, hey, guy, man, that was great. Show me that again. That's a great thing to have. Now, you have a very stellar competition career as well, too. You compete a lot, right? I see the pictures. I see the, the trophies and the awards. Tell me a little bit about your competing background.
Yeah, I've been competing all the way since I was a white belt.
That's crazy.
I compete at least 6 times a year still. Masters division, so I compete with the old guys. But that's actually another thing I love about our martial arts. Like, I've always been involved in sports, my whole life. And there was a period of time when you're done with that, you kind of feel like the competitiveness of you doesn't leave, but you feel kind of like that urge to want to get out there and compete still.
Absolutely.
And that's what's unique about our martial art is like we have a lot of masters or guys around the same age that can still have an outlet to compete. Father time is a real thing, right? If you're over 40, you're not going to be competing with 20-year-olds.
Living proof.
Jiu-Jitsu is unique because we have those age brackets, which is great. And I also think too, because of the we were saying about the safety, you really shouldn't be getting hit in the head hard after 40, right? So competing in boxing is probably not a good idea. Competing in kickboxing, but jiu-jitsu, you can still do that. So I see people over 50 competing, and it's like I see myself competing to at least 50.
Yeah. But
I've been competing for 22 years.
So you also do strength training. You're also a personal trainer as well too. So can we talk about your personal training background? That's a unique characteristic where I haven't had a lot of people who have that certification on top of being a stellar coach.
I think that's a good point. So I think the strength conditioning background I had, I've been doing that for like close to 20 years as well. And a lot of that's like continuing education. I went through a lot of certifications and just workshops and whatnot. But that I think helps me as a jiu-jitsu coach because not only does it help because I have to coach people, it's communication.
Yeah.
I take those skills, bring them here, but you also understand how to program design for like workouts, for example.
Right.
Or you understand, because you learn this through years of strength conditioning, you get more familiar with biomechanics and injury mechanisms. So then you kind of understand more your student safety on the mat because it's helped me as a coach over here, the strength conditioning. But not only that, I think it also helps you to be fit because like a lot of people come in here and they just want to do jiu-jitsu, but I'm like, hey, you got to do the resistance training as well. You got to add that component to it. And I can give students some help with that because it's not just one. It's not just nutrition, strength training, or just the jiu-jitsu. As an athlete, you got to do all 3.
Yeah. And so, when I got here, I didn't realize that working out didn't mean I was putting in the right work. right? Didn't mean I was eating properly. Didn't mean I was doing the right conditioning to put myself in a better position to not gas out immediately. And so, you can fool yourself until you come in here.
Yeah.
And then you realize there's nothing that emulated in the gym what it's like to have a live body against you.
Well, I can talk about that. So all training is, what you do outside of here is general.
Right.
So it's all general stuff. So most people think there's this fallacy in sports, is that they think like there's sports specific training, which there are to some degree, but most of it is general. So what you do in the weight room and your cardio is general qualities that help you improve as an athlete and you play your sport.
Right.
That's very specific. So doing a bunch of like training outside of here, that's why I recommend people lift weights maybe 2 to 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
They do cardio once a week, maybe outside of here.
Yeah.
Just so they get those general qualities to improve them on the mat. But
Right.
if you're investing too much time in that,
Yes.
it can actually hurt your sport because now you're too tired to play
Right.
your sport, i.e. jiu-jitsu, what we're doing.
Correct. And so that's why it's funny, because I actually cut down on the weightlifting when I started coming here.
Yeah.
So I was like, yo, this ain't gonna cut it, man.
I tell people, if they're coming into me here training, they're saying, hey, I lift weights 4 days a week, 5 days a week. I'm like, yeah, you're going to have to cut that down.
Yeah.
Probably 2 to 3.
Yeah, and it's tough because as a guy, mentally, when you go to the gym, you're expecting to lift the weights. You're expecting, I didn't work out if I didn't lift. And so this approach changes that. Where you're like, yeah, man, it's better if I just work on calisthenics, yoga, flexibility, core work. Do 35 minutes of
Yeah,
that.
you can still lift weights. You can still lift weights.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. Like it's really also your weaknesses. If you're really tight, you probably want to spend less of the lifting. But if you're weak, you need to add a little more lift. That's where I think it's very strength training or more cardio.
Yeah.
But that's where you kind of have to be honest with yourself or have a coach that can evaluate you.
What's the future of Downriver Jiu-Jitsu and the path that you've taken? You've been successful for so many years, taught so many great people. Like I said, I've been continually coming back. I was out for a year with that back injury, and I couldn't wait because I was like, there was something that said to me, I have to get back because this was incomplete for me.
Well, future for me, yes, I love competition is always a favorite thing for me, competing and actually having competitors going out there to compete. That's like a special project. I love that because I've always been a competitor. But the reality is, the majority of people that do jiu-jitsu don't compete.
Right, yeah.
So our largest impact we have is on the community.
Beautiful.
So getting people to come in here and train, have an impact on people's lives. So for me, it's just to continue to help impact the community.
That question.
So get people in, help them build their confidence, self-esteem, all those things. You get a lot of people come in here from all walks of life that maybe Absolutely. Some people are divorced, they're really stressed. I think jiu-jitsu is an incredible outlet because unlike activities just like exercise, there's a lot more thinking involved here. And it's one of the few activities you can do where your brain shuts off. Like you could be lifting weights and in between sets you're thinking, I guess I got to run that errand. Oh, I got to help my kids with their homework today. And you're just thinking all these things stressful. And because there's always got to be downtime. But when you have somebody attacking you and you're just thinking, your brain shuts off.
Yes.
And I think that's why people love jiu-jitsu so much, is because you get a reset.
Yes.
Like when you're grappling, you're not thinking of anything else but what you're doing. Right.
I think the most fascinating part was when even near great, the anticipation of something happening now, you get like that feel for it. Okay, somebody's moving my body this way. I better be positioned better, right? You're thinking ahead now. Before I had no clue, zero. So I was just like tap, tap, tap. Now somebody's, these guys' skill levels off the charts here. But at least I have a mental note of like, okay, I think you're trying to do this.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, better stop here. Better be prepared for this. Now my back's taken. How am I going to, breathe? Like, I didn't know how to breathe.
And that's actually another good point. What you're saying is really defense. So defense is actually the easiest thing to learn because we can all say like it's easier to block a punch than it is to actually like throw a punch at you, right? Just like avoiding bad positions or submissions. And I think that's where people get so much better is because instantly when they get more familiar in their like first couple of years of training, now it requires more skill for somebody to tap you because just having a little bit of knowledge about a position instantly improves your defense. Right. Like you don't have to be a master. That's what's so cool about jiu-jitsu is that you don't have to be a master of a position. If you just have some knowledge of that, it's easy to avoid.
Absolutely.
But to be good though,
oh my God,
and to really do moves on people, that's where it requires a lot of investment and it requires like mastery in a specific position.
That's when I always say, don't be feeling yourself. It's like I'll be like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. And I'm like, oh man, go get some of the blue belts. I'm like, nah, you ain't so good. Let it close. Right. So it's a humbling experience. You know what I find great is just that the ability to come back. It's always welcoming here. It's always been a great environment. You know, you encourage guys to hey, do a tournament, and you're like, hey man, I'm not gonna be screaming at you because you got tagged. Like just go out. And the good part about it, to your point, hey, you're over 40, you've never competed. The camaraderie that's involved and the cheering that's involved in putting yourself out there. You guys are encouraging people, right?
I think that's the big thing because, like, I remember one of my mentors would always say, like, you know, he would talk about this is like when you're competing, that like we have this anxiety that like people are going to be up, like our teachers, our peers are going to be like, oh man, that guy lost last Saturday, and they don't want to show their face at the gym,
right?
But you're like, it's not really like that. Like nobody cares. Like no one really cares. Like they care about the person, but they don't care that they're just excited you went out there and competed.
Absolutely.
And sure they want to see you win, of course.
Right.
But I think people put so much pressure on themselves to win because they think they're worried about what other people think of them.
Absolutely.
And the reality is nothing changes.
Nothing.
Like win, lose, or draw.
Yeah.
People are going to say, Rashad, we think exactly the same of you.
Absolutely.
We're happy you won a medal.
Right.
Or, you know, if you didn't, it's like, that's all right. Good job. But nobody cares. It's not. But I think in our head, we're always like, oh, man, everyone's worried about competing because they're worried about what their peers are going to say.
I've always thought in the approach of, I'm here on a Saturday, you know, competing when other people are doing the easy stuff. So for that, it's an accomplishment unto itself. So like, you know, I haven't done many jiu-jitsu tournaments, but when I was doing Taekwondo, I said, win, lose, or draw. I'm doing this right now.
Yeah.
While somebody else isn't. So this is my win, no matter what. Talk about that with confidence. Well, you weren't doing that. So, you know, it's always better to be in the arena.
That's right. It's usually the people that criticize you are always going to be the ones that are sitting on the couch.
Without question.
Just like you see in sporting events, right? You see the guy sitting on his couch, oh, that guy should have done this. And yet he's never played the sport. Never done anything. Or you see, you go to any like Buffalo Wild Wings and there's UFC, they're like, oh, I knocked that guy out. That guy sucks. And you're like, yeah, no. Like,
world-class athlete that got knocked out.
Yeah.
World-class athlete.
Yeah. And how humbling that is in front of like, you know, if they get knocked out in front of like some people, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's definitely some humble pie you have to swallow.
Without question. You know, so I always ask this of the guests because I'm so honored to speak with every single one of them. People's time, they don't have to give it to me. Where can people find you? I don't need to know. Obviously, you're successful and continue to grow. But for the purpose of the podcast, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can go to downriverbjj.com. You can find us there or on Instagram, Downriver Jiu-Jitsu, at Downriver Jiu-Jitsu on Instagram.
I'll tell you one thing, man. I've been pumped for this one for a long time. You know, we bounced dates back and forth. And I got to tell you, this has been an absolute honor and a pleasure because at the end of the day, this is the secret sauce and the magic that's taught here. And for anybody who wants to train, this is the place to go.